Hello, everybody. Hello, and
What's
welcome.
up?
Welcome to the Remedy. How you guys doing today?
I'm good,
Pretty
man.
good.
Enjoying this beautiful cold weather here in Philadelphia.
Yeah,
Trying to.
Trying to.
it's
Yeah.
keeping my gardening down.
Yeah,
Well,
I can help it today. I have to keep my head warm, man. It's cold in here, but I'm glad that we are all here, um, and we are alive. Amen.
Amen.
Can I get an amen?
Amen.
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 Amen. We are alive and we're still kicking. We have a great show today. Just before we begin, I just want to remind those of you who are watching either on Facebook or on YouTube, we appreciate you and we thank you for being part of the remedy. Please share this video with your friends and family. Um, like the videos if you enjoy what you're watching. We need your help and we need your support so that we can get the word to all of those people who needs to hear it. So we need your support with that. Having said that, let's get started. Let's go around the room real quick. Jimmy, what's going on in your world? How you doing?
Well, I don't know if you could have heard while you were talking. My kids are going crazy.
It's the
uh,
sound of life, my friend. It's the
yeah,
sound of life.
yeah, the life that's driving me to death.
Yes.
Yeah, but yeah, like you said, I woke up. It was pretty cold, and I've been planning to garden for the past year or so, and this year I finally got into it and tilled the soil. And every time I put seeds out there, it gets cold again. So I'm just
It
waiting for the
happens.
temperature to break.
Yeah, that's right. Markel, what's up with you?
I've been pretty good this week.
Cool t-shirt, man.
Yeah, man, gotta support husband, daddy, protector, and hero.
Hero.
There you go, hero.
Yeah,
Wife
that's
got
what's
this.
up.
Wife
Cool
got this shirt
t-shirt.
for me, and I'm also rocking my Haiti chain, Haitian Heritage Month, this month. So just representing for my culture and stuff. Actually, I'm glad I wore it today because based off of the topic, being Haitian has affected me a lot, and we'll get
I'm
into
good.
that when we
Good,
talk a little
good,
bit.
good,
But
good, good.
achievement mark this week. My daughter learned how to ride a two-wheeler. We was outside for a little bit in front of our yard here, so that's pretty cool. She's super excited about that. I'm super excited because I've been training her to get it for about a week and a half, and she wasn't getting it yet. And I'm starting to feel like, man, is it me? Am I a bad trainer? All this other type of stuff. But
Well, it's not that you're a bad trainer. If my memory serves me right, you still don't know how to ride a full trailer. Let's move on. Jeffrey, how you doing, buddy? Yo, Mike, you got on mute. You got on mute.
My bad. Yeah, I've been good, taking it one day at a time. You know, I've been feeling myself getting a little stiff and lazy, so I'm starting to like run a little more and get a little active, keep my body in shape. So like I'm just trying to stay active, take it one day at a time.
Yeah, I mean you have to, man. We
Yeah.
need you. We need you. Pat, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah.
Um, I'm
Look at
finishing
that
my.
smile. Look at that smile. She's like, I'm good.
I'm trying
Praise
to tell
God.
myself I'm good. I'm finishing my PhD. I don't know if I need to finish it or just run away from it, but I'm good.
Well, you can't run away. You are
I
too
can't run
close
away.
to
I'm
go
too
back
close.
right now.
I'm too close, but I'm
That's
good.
right.
Everybody's good. Everybody's well. Trying to think of all the positive stuff that we have around us. How's my lighting? I'm trying to work with this Pocono 30
You're
degree.
fine. This is so much better. Now we can see your beautiful face.
Thanks. And it's 30 degrees this morning. So I had to rock the tempo sweater today. So,
Yes. We all doing it.
yes.
Well, we're ready, family. We're all ready. But before we begin, let's pray. Mark, would you pray for us today? Yeah, he likes to pray by himself.
I was on mute. Sorry about
There
that.
you go. It's all
Father
right.
God in heaven, we thank you for allowing the crew to reunite here safely. We thank you for this opportunity to talk openly and discuss our views, our religion, and hopefully it touches other people around the world, give them different perspective on things, and encourage them to come to you, dear Lord. We thank you for all you've done everything you're doing and will continue to do. In the name of Jesus Christ, we pray to you. Amen.
Amen. Amen. In case you're wondering where is Eddie, he's on YouTube right there, behind the scene, making sure that those who are listening know what's going on and they can be engaged in the conversation today. So kudos to you, Ed. So today's topic, da da da. Yeah, here we go. I hate religion, but I love God. It's an interesting topic to begin with, title to begin with. So this discussion is really about dealing with or talking about the dirty water that's in the church. The kind of conversation I believe that we need to have. So there are three groups of people who are part of this conversation. There are those of us who are in the church, but also feel that there are things going on in the church that as Christians shouldn't exist anymore. There are those of us who were in the church but who left because of what happened to us while we were in the church. And then there's another group who's on the outside listening to what goes on in the church and they don't want to have anything to do with the church. All right. So all they are right now, those of you who are part of this discussion, we all have been in church in some level. Some of you have been in church since you were a toddler. Some of you not only became church members, some of you even went into pastoral school and so forth. So I believe that you all have a say into what we need to discuss today. So here's the first question. Um, Based on what you experience, what are some reasons that I'm going to give you one, and then you can agree or disagree, and we can fight among ourselves with it. One of the number one reason that people leave the church is because they feel like they are suffocating. That the church is using fear to keep them in line, not necessarily teaching them the love of God, but using fear to keep them in line. And because of that, and they also say that that kind of teaching, everything about the world is demonized. You know, everything in the world is evil. There's nothing good in the world whatsoever. So the only safe place is for you to be in church. And they also feel because of that, that they feel that the church isn't forming the members to learn how to disciple, but instead they just preach to you and install fear in you. And so there's a group of people who don't have anything to do with it. What's your take on that?
Um, I think it's one of it's a very good, a valid point. When you look at some of the evangelistic efforts that we have, especially when they're trying to get people to get baptized, one of the things they say, if you don't get baptized, your soul is not going to be sealed, and you're not going to go to heaven, and fire and brimstone. You don't know if Jesus is going to come for you tomorrow. Then they start. You might walk outside and get hit by a car, and all this stuff, and you know all these things, and then people get baptized out of the fear, and
Mhm.
then after a month or a couple months or maybe even a year, they're gone, because what got brought in by the fear, but there was nothing to keep them there.
Mhm. Mhm.
There was no family, there was no love, there was no direction. You're baptized, okay, now go on and do your own thing and figure it out on your own. And that's, I think I see that a lot, especially young people, and people that are actually searching. um I see that a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I'm glad Jimmy said that because that takes me back to a story that happened to me when I was growing up in the church. I remember we had like an altar call. I think I was about 10, 11 years old at the time. And the pastor of the church, he called everybody. He was calling people for altar calls, and he was saying, "Oh, accept Jesus today," this and that, and at the time, I wasn't really in that type. I wasn't really in that place yet. I haven't really come to that decision yet. So I didn't really go up there. But all the young people in the church went up there. So literally, like one of the elders of the church literally grabbed my arm and pulled me up there in front of the whole church. It was really embarrassing. And so that's a prime example of that right there.
For me, Organized religion is a business. I mean, anything in life is pretty much a business. Some people say, hey, I'm non-denominational, but not understanding that non-denominational within itself is a denomination. It's just called non-denomination. It is definitely a fine line between religion and God. I personally believe that you kind of need some type of an umbrella. I know everybody, once you look at and start studying the Bible, everybody can interpret the Bible differently. I get it. And eventually by interpretation, then become religion. Religion is man-made, just like you have one bank, two banks, three banks, we have different religion. I also do think, like everybody's saying, that specifically back in the days, religion was extremely arbitrary. There wasn't a lot that you can say. You just go, you go with the flow. Hence, by the time you're 18, you're about to go on your own. You just do your own thing. You decide not to go to church. I had decided not to go to church. And then when I started having kids again, and I believe I needed to bring them back into some kind of religious upbringing, then I brought them back. With that said, I think it's also generational. It's cultural. Us Blacks and Haitian, there is that culture going to church. So that's one thing. There's also the respect for your parents. That's another thing. As Black people, we are known to be Christian and going to church. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I do think that we need to be able to express ourselves freely. And with the new generation, like my kids, you could tell they express themselves more freely. They're also more accepting of others. That's another thing. Church was, to me, was synonymous to hypocrisy, because you are going to church so that we all can be loved. Meanwhile, somebody's talking about the kind of dress you wore, the kind of earrings you came in with. So it kind of was the opposite of what church was supposed to be. So I think that as the new generation, we can see a whole lot of difference. They're not as critical, but even within the older generation, even my own family member, they are extremely critical of the church and what church you attend. Let's say, for instance, Catholicism versus Seventh Adventists. Everybody thinks Seventh Adventists is extremely rigid, while Catholicism is a religion that you just play with. So even within religion, people are, they criticize what religion you come from and, how well you adapt to a certain religion versus another. Like I've seen people that act extremely religious at church, but then outside of church, you wonder if they should even be in church. So to me, that kind of hypocrisy is something that we really need to look into as we are going more into a modernized society. We need to accept each other for who they are and stop putting those stereotypes and things that says, oh, I'm religious because I pray 24/7. Some people can pray 10 minutes and they are as religious as somebody that prayed 24/7. So, and we do that a lot to each other. I know for me at one time, that was one of the reasons I didn't want to hear anything about religion. It was like, it's a bunch of hypocrites and I don't want to have anything to do with it. If you look at me and you don't think I go to church and you don't think that I believe in God, then that's on you. I know what I do. And I've had that from even my own family member that think that, she's just not as sacred as she should be. But who can tell me how sacred I can be?
We're going to put a pen on that. Markel, what's your take on this? As the fear, the church tends to install fear on you to get you to comply.
Okay, so I'm going to tie in a little bit of what Patty said and also go with Jeff, because I felt like that as a young guy. You don't really have a choice as much. The way Jesus used to preach back in the day, he would come and talk to you and things of that sort and touch your heart with his message. And then the choice would be yours, right? But then the way we do things here in churches and cultures and cliques, it's like, hey, this is what we're doing, and you join in on. And then once you join on, it's like, okay, now that you're on, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to move. This is what you need to say. This is how you need to act. So when you start to put me in a box and tell me exactly what I need to do and how I need to move, the first thing you're going to get, especially from the young generation, is resistance. Because you preached me this message, especially you use this Bible verse a lot that says, come as you are, right? So then I come as I am, and then once I'm in the door, boom, you shut the door, and your initial thing to do now is change what I was into who you think I should be. Now, the moment you start to do that, I'm going to feel claustrophobic. I'm going to be like, no, this isn't me. Back up. And then you get the things that happen most of the time in church, young people who do come in, who turn their life over, who get baptized, and then a month or two after they get baptized, you don't see them anymore. Because now that I'm baptized, I remember myself, I got baptized young. I think I got baptized at like 13, 14 years old, right? And from that day forward, going baptized, I had my Bible with me and I had my notebook with me. And here I am in church listening to sermons, and then they're like, okay, now that you're baptized, you need to start working your way into coming early for lessons. And come early from lessons. Now you got to be a deacon. Now that you're a deacon, you got to influence the other young people and make them just like you. And it's like, wait, I'm still trying to get me together. You see what I'm saying? And now you're putting all these requirements on me, restrictions on me. And then the older I got, just like Patty said, once you get to a certain age, for me, because I'm Haitian, it was the respect for my parents. I'm only going to go to church as my parents want me to go to church. And while I'm sitting at church and I'm dead faced looking at the pastor, I'm thinking about a whole basketball game that I'm going to play tomorrow because I'm not here anymore. So once you start to do that in the church, you're going to lose people immediately.
Well, I mean, I hear what you guys are saying, and so we need to figure out how do we balance this? And on one hand, I hear you saying, okay, you walk into the church, come as you are, but at which point, come as you are becomes you come as you are, but come on, man, you've been as you are for a long time there. I mean, at some point there ought to be a growth, I think, and we're gonna talk a little bit about the growth a little bit later. It almost to me, I remember even in my own days, evangelistic seminar, which I used to preach on, and I used to use the same thing, except I remember that I always used to wonder about those groups of Christians who get baptized because we were talking about the mark of the beast. So we were talking about the end of times, and we were talking about, all the bad things that's going to happen to those who are not under the banner of the cross. And so a lot of people come to the church because from the pulpit, we as preachers, we preach fear. We install fear in them. And so they wash in, they say, yes, I believe, because they don't want to be, they don't want to be destroyed with the enemy. They don't want that. But so they come into the church now eager, okay? Eager, even though they came with fear, but they came into the church. They are eager to, and they are hungry, they are thirsty, they're on fire. Let's even use that word, because I remember that's what it was for me. But as you get older in the church, as you begin to settle down, the fire begins to settle down. Now your eyes begin to look around and see, wait a minute, all that hype is not what it seemed. You begin to question everything that you know, which it brings me to the second point why people leave the church. How do we respond when one of us in the church who's still new, whether it's a year old or 2 years old in the church, and you are struggling with some of the things that you thought you believe in?
Let me jump in really quick.
Yeah.
You said a couple points there. Once you get baptized, Jimmy mentioned this when he spoke about the pressure, the fear of being baptized, because how it's preached often is if you're not baptized, you're not saved. And if you're not saved, you won't go to heaven. So if I'm learning about religion, and that's the first kind of approach that you bring to me, and my thought process is to be eternally saved. So it's like, okay, I got to get baptized. Now, then the next thing that you just said is, you know, you've been there and you're on fire. So like myself, I was on fire, ready to go reading my Bible. Then I started to go down a notch. The reason why I believe a lot of people start to go down a notch is because Patty mentioned this as well. You start to see hypocrites. And I know it's not right to look at other people, but as we said before in the last week's episode, we're human. So a lot of things are just human nature. But you start to see hypocrites inside the church. You start to see people who's like, hey, this is the way you're supposed to move, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And you're like, okay. And then you see that person not moving the way they just told you to move. And then it's like, well, if you don't have to move like that, why do I have to move like that? And then you're telling me to do this and do that and the third, but then I see you not doing it. Or here's another one that always tripped me out. Don't go to certain places as a young Christian growing up. Don't go to certain places. Myself, movie theaters was a place that you weren't supposed to go because the type of movie you're going to see, the atmosphere and all this other type of stuff. And then I saw one of the church deacon guys at the movie theater. So then I'm just like, wait, that don't make sense to me because you're telling me one thing and then now you're doing totally something. So yeah, I come in hot, and then when I start to notice everybody else's flaws, then you hit me, you know what I mean? Then I back up. Go ahead, Jim.
You guys touched on something that's really crucial, the hypocrisy thing. One of the things I've learned from the young people at my church, and dealing with them, and I took a different approach as I started studying the Bible for myself, and starting reading the Bible for myself, and starting to see some of the hypocrisies that we have in the church. So I took a different approach with the young people that I talk to and I teach, and I'm straightforward with them. I'm you know just cut straight to the chase with them, and no sugarcoating anything. They ask me questions because they want the answer. If I have it, I give it to them. If I don't, then I tell them I'll find it or point them in the direction that they'll get it. One of the things that it marked that kind of I don't remember, I don't know how to say it, but one of the young people, we finished doing a Sabbath school lesson, and I asked one of the young people to pray, and she said, "Thank you, God, for allowing Jimmy to be real." And
Authenticity. Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
and that really stuck with me, because that's what people are looking for.
Mhm.
The hypocrisy comes from us trying to put on a front. I'm in church, so I have to be perfect. I'm in church, so I can't be sinful. I'm trying to be like Jesus, and Jesus didn't sin. And I think we missed the point. I think we missed the point a lot. And with the moment we become more vulnerable, and I've told these to my elders in my church all the time. The moment you become more vulnerable and tell people, like, I used to be a bum, I used to be a drug pusher, I used to be a womanizer, I used to be all these things, and then this is how I got out of it. A lot of them are going to have much more respect for you because now they can relate to you a little bit more. And that's why a lot of people leave, because I'm not going to be able to relate to somebody that has never been through what I've been through. Or I don't know he's been through it, but he's never been through what I've been through. They've never had sexual immorality. They've never been tempted. They've never had any of those things. So why would I go to that person to spill my guts or to help me walk through anything if they've been perfect their whole life, supposedly?
So real quick, I see some comments in here. One of the comments read, I think one of the problems is that people expect churches to be perfect and without flaw. And that kind of ties in exactly to what Jimmy was saying. And I'll go ahead and add to that, PD. We spoke about this before. There's a pastor that is starting to get big and things like that, Michael Todd. He mentioned a lot. He talks about his issue with pornography. And when I tell you that it connected with a whole bunch of people, male and female, his following gained more simply just because of that. So if you can get a pastor to open up and be honest, it's like some people, Jeffrey, I'm not there yet, but if you're married, You know what I mean? You want to go to a marriage counselor to get counseling on your marriage. But if you're talking to a marriage counselor and sometimes they haven't, or they're not married, because I know a marriage counselor who's not married, you can't tell me anything about my marriage if you're not married. So I can't really talk to you.
Agreed. I have to say, I definitely agree with Markel and Jimmy. As a matter of fact, my cousins in Canada converted because they have a pastor, and I went there one time, and it's a young pastor, and he knows how to embrace the crowd. It's a young crowd, and he talks about his days as a drug dealer, his days at this, and you'll be surprised how the audience just, they are drawn to him and they go every week. It's kind of like you talk about everything. You know, we don't have to worry about, oh my God, this person is going to judge me. Oh my God, this person is going to judge me. Now, yes, it is expected. The church is expected to have a certain platform. It's like when you go to a certain school and that prestige that goes with the school. There is that as well. However, I remember one of my kids mentioned to me, what is the purpose of learning if you're going to continue cultural things that makes no sense? Because I, for one, is one that I do have a great science background, but I'll tell you, there are many cultural things that I do that makes no sense at all. But then I'm like, well, that's how I was taught. And my kids are like, but scientifically or common sensely, it does not make any sense at all. And I'm like, but it's okay. That's my culture. So that just to tell you, sometimes we do know, but then we're like, that's how it was done. And I think that we need to get away from that. That's how it was done. Because this way, maybe we didn't have the proper education at that time. And not that we do now, then we ought to continue to learn and take it to the next step. Because what's the purpose of learning? And if we continue to do the same thing when we know better.
Correct. And
real quick,
back on what you were saying, Pat.
Real quick, hold on, real quick, because a comment is in here, and it says, I think authenticity was always there, just pushed down. And I think that new teachings from little bit of the Bible push people into rules. And that was going to go into what Patty was saying there. And it also ties in with me because I think some cultural things or some people who may have been sitting at the top of the board now decided to instill their own personal rules into the church and now make it seem like this is part of what it is to be Christian. And it wasn't at all. It was just their personal rules. They just want everybody to move how they want to move. So go ahead.
Yeah, but I think part of the reason they are like that, it's their understanding of God as well. If you think that God is a mafia and he walk around with a 4x4, you do well, he'll bless you. And you don't do well, he's going to use that 4x4, he's going to whack you. If this is your understanding of God, you're going to pass down that teaching to those around you in the same way. You're gonna teach a very authoritative God to the youngsters. And most people don't want to have anything to do with that kind of God, because what good is it? I know I'm a sinner. You told me I'm a sinner, and you're telling me if I continue to live the way that I'm living, I'm going to go straight to hell. Then why do I need God? It took me a while to finally understand that kind of teaching is not biblical. I realized, and I started doing it with my kids, and it changed my entire view as a parent. I remember growing up, you do what your parents tell you to do. You don't have to understand it. You don't have to agree with it. They tell you, this is what I want you to do. You just do it. And when I became a parent, I started doing the same thing with my kids and realized when they reach the age where they can begin to make their own decisions, they don't listen to anything that I have to say. They do what they want to do. And when I went back to the Bible, I realized, wait a minute, why don't I teach them the way that God does with me? Because you see, when God works with me, he laid down the foundation. He wants you to work in it, but he also knows if you don't go that way, There are things that can happen to you as a result of not following the rules. God is not inflicting the pain on me. He's not inflicting the punishment on me. He allowed me to have free will, knowing if I choose to do it his way, I will have the benefits of choosing and of doing it his way. There are benefits that's attached to it. If I also choose not to do it his way, then there are consequences that can happen. For example, you know, let's say in the medical field, we can talk about it. Smoking, for example, right? You have a kid who's struggling with that. Well, you can sit there with them and say, listen, smoking is not good for you. But at the end of the day, the kid has to make a choice. That's the free will that I think is missing in the church. We don't allow people the freedom to choose. We want them to walk into our club. The moment you become a member, this is what you must do. If you don't do it, get out. If you don't want to do it, get out. But as long as you're a member of this group, this is what you must do. And I realize that's not the way it works with God. God gives us free will, even though He gives us the Bible, He gives us the prescription, what we ought to do, but He allows us to choose. And as we make decisions, some will be good, some will be bad. We realize more and more as we are making those decisions. Wait a minute. If I listened to what God told me back then, I wouldn't be where I am today. The same way, if you do it as a parent, the child will come to a point where the child will say, if I had listened to my parents, I wouldn't be where I am today. But you have to allow that to take place. That's the growth sometimes that I think we don't allow to take place in the church.
And
Yes, ma'am.
here's the difference, and I'm going to pass it to Jeffrey after this because he's I would say the youngest out of us, so he could definitely speak for the younger generation.
Well, I'm the youngest.
My fault, Patty. I forgot that. You just had a birthday. My bad. So here's what happens, and I'm telling you this because it happens to me also. The difference in what you're saying versus us versus church and how Jesus takes us is when we do something wrong in God's eyes, He already sees it. He already knows we did wrong, and all we have to do is pray about it, repent, and ask for forgiveness. And then we're clean of it. He don't bring it back up. He don't never say anything else about it. It's over. But with church, you do something wrong in church, i.e., get pregnant. That's it. It's a wrap. You out of here. I remember specifically in the church that I grew up in, there was a young lady who did get pregnant, but she still was coming around the church and things of that sort. She was helping out with the choir, and they were singing the next Saturday. She went on stage to show them where to position themselves, and she almost got her head chopped off because people were telling her, you sinner, yelling at her in front of everybody, get off of the stage, get off of the stage. Da, 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 da. So when you talk about the church being a representation of Jesus, but you have people in the church that act this way, that's when you get the young people who are just saying, I'm out of here. I can't be perfect. The moment I do something wrong, you put me on the cross as if I'm Jesus. And then not only do you put me on the cross, you never let me let it down. You always bring it back up as a reminder. And that's not the way Jesus intended Christianity to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, but I gotta say this, man. Like the hypocritical, like religious people, like they sit in the pews of most churches in America, you know. Like they are the smug, self-righteous, egotistical ones who carry like a 20-pound King James Bible, but they're as mean as a bulldog, you know. Like they are the grace killers, in my opinion. Like they're constantly finding fault in the leadership and in the body of Christ and in the people of the church. And even when they see someone overtaken by a sin or in a fault, like they don't come to you in private or in a spirit of meekness, kindness, or gentleness, but they instantly shun you or they spill your business in front of the whole church, you know. And that drives a lot of young people out of the church. And it's the sad but honest truth.
Mm-hmm.
No, Jeffrey, it is true. I have some of my Afro-American friends. Actually, we have two of them that when they had kids, they were Baptists, and they said never never will my kids step a foot in a Baptist church because these people are hypocrites. So people don't seem to realize when you do that, that person carry that burden to the point where they're done with you. Like my two friends said they would never step, nor will their kids. I mean, up until they're 18, if they so want to desire it after that, because these people were so hypocritical. And just like Jeffrey was saying, they shun you, they throw cast, just like Markel was saying. So this is a place that's supposed to be where you go to get help. They're supposed to be where you go to trying to feel better. But yet it's a place that you're supposed to put that facade on, because truthfully, they don't know who you are, because you have that one facade when you go to church, and then that other facade, when you're outside of the church, because you had to put that facade on for church members. And I think we know better now. It's a different generation. And as the generation continues, I think we ought to allow the new generation to feel more comfortable. Is church for everybody? No. Some people can worship God without church. However, just like people go to school, most of the time in actual facility, church is a community. So therefore, there will always be religion. There will always be a place to worship. And I think that place to worship should be a place where people feel comfortable. People are going to feel comfortable 100%? No. But if you're able to make people feel 90% of the people comfortable, then you know what? We're never going to get 100%. But I think right now, I don't even know if we are 50%, to be honest with you.
And Patty just said something that really stands out as well. I learned this in a marketing class that I took. Most people, the way they are, if they hear a good thing, for example, a sale at a certain store that's going on right now, they're going to go to the store and they may tell one or two people about that sale. They're not going to tell everybody about the sale, because eventually if you tell everybody, the sale will be over. They're going to go get all the stuff that you just bought. Now, the flip side is, if you hear something negative about that store, you are going to more than likely tell 10 or more people about that negative thing. So if you put that in terms of the church, if I come to this church, the Christian thing to do is to reach out and preach the message to other people. And I'm going to go ahead and do that. But the moment I get backlash, I'm more than likely going to be like, yo, don't ever go to that church, dog. Let me tell you what they did to me. Just like her friend said, her kids are never going to that church anymore. Never, simply because of what she encountered, not what the kids are going to encounter, but what she encountered. So she's one person and she's telling her two kids not to go to church. If we continue on this type of path, church will continue to go down.
Yeah, Jimmy.
I think one of the issues that we have in our churches, and being an elder, well, they say elder for life or whatever, but I'm not an elder at my church anymore. But having been an elder and been in board, and if you guys know anything about my mom, and she's very outspoken, and I'm kind of like that too in board. So like when things aren't going the way they're supposed to go, we speak up. In particular, when we talk about the rules, and admonishing people, the Bible gave us a perfect example of how we're supposed to admonish people when they're doing something that is wrong. And even in the Seventh Day Adventist Church, which I'm a part of, it's in the manual, and it says if you do not follow this God-given prescription, you have no authority to enact any type of discipline without following this prescription. And it was part of the research I did. Was Matthew 18 verses 15 to 17. And then just verse 15, it says, if a brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone. If he hears you, you have gained your brother. And then it continues. If he doesn't, then bring one or more people that are spiritually minded people to come, and so that they can try to gain this soul back. And if they don't listen, then you bring it to the church. And then if they don't listen, and then you're at that point where you're not on the same train as us. We're trying to help you, but you're not on the same. You're welcome to come along, but you're obviously not wanting to be part of this group. And that's the prescription that we're supposed to follow. And
Jim, the last point you made, though, the church, when they reach that point, they're supposed to look at that person The same way you spend money during the summer, you spend 10 to 15 to $20,000 to have an evangelistic series so that people can be baptized. You should spend just as much time and energy for that on that one soul to win them back to Christ. That's what's missing. We're good with you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're not part of this group anymore. Get out of here. We don't need people like you. You're going to be a bad influence. Instead of look at this person as an opportunity, because there's nothing more beautiful than to have someone who was struggling who come back to the church, and now that person is on fire, and that person he's authentic enough to share what he was struggling with the young people who are now struggling with the same thing. I think that's what's missing. That link up is missing. We kick them out and we say, don't come back here anymore. We don't have space for you. We don't have space for people like you. Where in reality, this is exactly the kind of people that we need to be on fire for Jesus. You understand what I mean? Earlier, I think it was Pat who mentioned, and Markel mentioned it as well. Sex. Sex in the church is, look, you don't do it. Period. That's it. There's no and if or buts about it. We find out you're doing it, you're going to be chastised. We don't want you to do it. We don't want you to have friends who's doing it. We don't want you to know anything about it. That kind of teaching doesn't work anymore. I always say this. We always look at sex as a negative thing. And I said, well, wait a minute. The devil didn't create this. God did. He created this beautiful chemistry that can go on between a husband and a wife, and he gives sex to Adam and Eve. So he knew there was something beautiful there when he gave it to them. The church now has, we're living in an age where people don't get married at 13. They don't get married at 14. So they don't have, as soon as they come into puberty, they're already married. So there's certain temptations or certain things that they're no longer exposed to. Nowadays, most young people are waiting for their late 20s to be married. While they are waiting, they are still living in a very sexual, aggressive culture, sexually aggressive culture, and they are bombarded with that on a daily basis. What is the role of the church? What can we or should we be doing to help with that issue instead of shunning them or make them feel shameful when one of them when they get pregnant is it's now they were having sex. But here the research showed that the amount of young people in the church are having just as much sex as those outside the church.
But
so don't even bother trying to say, oh, they're not having sex in the church. Yes, they are.
I gotta say one thing though with that, and it is important for the church to talk about those type of topics, but I do believe this type of topic does start in the household before the person even gets to church. And I say that because just how church is afraid to talk about sex, parents are afraid to talk about sex to their kids. And in my generation, in my culture, the moment you bring up a sex question, it's like, so you having sex? And it's like, no, I'm not having sex. I'm
pull out the gun.
And then it's like, why you asking me? Why you asking me that question? You know what I mean? So it really gets it's hard now. You now put the young generation, depending on the culture, because not every culture is the same. And even in my culture, not every parent is the same. They have that open door policy. Come talk to me as you want. I'm sure Patty has that. Monty has that. Jim, as well as me, growing up with my kids, I'm going to have it where they should be free to come ask me anything, regardless of what it is. And before I jump to conclusion, I need to hear them out to kind of figure out where they are in their lives. But growing up, that's a definite no type of conversation, because it implies you're doing certain things or you're curious about certain, you're about to go do certain things. So I do believe it is the church's responsibility to talk about it. And if someone falls or, so to speak, sins, you don't chastise them, you help them through it. But I do think that it does start in the household.
And with to add to what Markel was saying, I totally agree. And I think with us, the new generation, with my kids, of course, my husband and I were like, okay, that's not what we want you to do. Of course, we will want you guys to wait, but we probably know you're not going to wait. And if you don't wait, this, and equip them with all the right stuff. However, we still need to try to instill the values within these kids as much as possible. However, when you still have temptation, you still know that you can talk to us, you can come to us, you can talk to your clergy, you can talk to this, you can talk to that. Because specifically for the Haitian community, the last thing you want is for them to say, well, the church talked to us about sex, and then the parents like, what? And then they'll go to somebody like you, Monday, as a pastor and say, what did you do? However, we do need to make them feel comfortable. If you have a problem, you can come and talk to us. If something happened, we're not going to chastise you. It should be a place of comfort, not a place of, oh, because you don't meet these criteria, we're going to push you aside. But still, we still ought to let these kids know values, because to be honest with you, I'm concerned about the next generation and values, but that's another topic. So we still need to continue to instill some of the values without being necessarily rigid. So we need to find that fine line between values and acceptability. But to me, I'm a big believer of people still trying to carry as much of the values as we see them as we can, because some people think certain things are values that are not necessarily values, but we still need to encourage each other to embrace the values, the positivity of life, but knowing that we are all sinners. And it doesn't mean that we're not going to do certain things that maybe we won't be too happy about 20 years from now. But when we do them, we should still have a community that's there to hold us and walk us through it.
Yeah,
also,
go ahead.
One of the comments here before you go, Jeff, I think Jeff got something to say. It says, I don't think I've ever been in a church where sex has been brought up to the youth outside of total abstinence. All these nurses and no education ever given.
Also, I wanted to add this point real quick. I also think that like the parents or your guardian or the person that takes care of you should like to expose you to like what it is at like not too young, but like at an age at like 12 or maybe or 11, around there, just so like like what's going to happen once you reach puberty and like once you have those temptations. And also because in the Bible in 1 Corinthians 10 verse 13, it says that no temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. So I don't think that like just because like you have the temptation, you should just do it immediately, because there's always a way of escape, no matter how hard it is. Like you should just pray about it and like ask God to help you escape that temptation.
Let me add something. It was a statistic I heard. It was years ago. I heard this statistic. I don't remember even the exact numbers, but it'll still make the point. In the Jewish community, it's not that they don't have problems with premarital sex or people getting pregnant. It's just that their problem is less than most cultures. And the reason they said that that study said they have that problem less is because they don't approach sex the way most cultures approach sex. They talk about sex openly, and they don't talk about sex just as a mechanical thing. They talk about it as a spiritual thing, a very blessed thing. So deep from the beginning, it's instilled in them that sex isn't just something you just go out and do. It's something that you prepare yourself for spiritually. You're looking for the right person to share this dare I say magical moment with. And I think that we cart sex under the table so much that it seems like an unimportant topic until it happens or the evidence of it happens. But if we put it on the forefront and as what it is, like you were saying, Pastor Madi, that it was a gift from God. It was given to Adam and Eve. and it's not just some, benign magical physical function. It's something spiritual. It's a connection that you're having with this person, and it's something that is, one of the comments says, sacred, so if they have that as a high value item, they're not going to be willing to give it away to anybody. But that's something that you were saying, Markel, has got to start from the family, and then reinforced at the church and other aspects of the community.
Jimmy, if I could say something for a minute, I agree with you. I agree with Michael. It is, and I tell you, that's what I was told about sex. It is high value. And in your mind, you're not giving it to anybody. When you do decide to give it at that time, hopefully, most of us think it is that person. So the truth of the matter is, at least for me, I was brought up, this is something you should do when you're getting married. This is something that, God has put in place, and it's one of the most magical thing. And it is true. However, what happened when you 17, 18, and you have that boyfriend that you think is that person? So you think that is the magical person. And then you find out 2 years later, no, there's another magical person, and so forth and so on. Hopefully not a whole lot of magical person. So the truth is, I think that for the most part, it is instilled in us as that. However, we are in a world where people nowadays, like Monday have said, they're getting married later. And actually, I've told my kids, I got married very early. I got married at 22. I'm telling my kids to get married at 35, 40. Get your life together, get everything that you want, and get married to a 35, 40. So what happened to that? Are they going to wait? The likelihood of that is no. The truth is no. Mm-hmm. So I think as things are changing and our priorities are changing, the value's still there, but is the value going to be what we want it to be? I don't think so. And then going back to what Michael have read regarding that person saying, I don't think they've ever had sex education in church. I don't think that's something I've ever seen in church either. But I guess what we're saying is maybe it is something that maybe, when you talk to the board and having the proper, maybe your nurse can talk about it with the assistance of a pastor, something like that. We all know in school, they do have sexual education in school. So maybe it is something that if we think about the right way to do it, that there should be a component of that in church.
So
we have a question. We have a question from YouTube, from live through. The question is how to help preserve the children, meaning for them to have the knowledge of preserving their own body until marriage. The key word here is for them to have the knowledge of preserving their own body until marriage. What should we tell them? So here we go again. I think when it comes to that, I believe that parents are the one who are making the decisions, and the church is not necessarily the young people. So the training should begin with the parents. Train the fathers and the mothers and those who are caregivers to know how to even begin that dialogue with their children about sex. Because if the parents are uncomfortable among each other to talk about sex, can you even imagine them talking to their children about sex? You understand what I mean? We grow up, some of us grow up in household where you never see your mom and dad kissing. You never see your mom and dad showing affection, and let alone hear your mom and dad even trying to do the do, if you know what I mean. So because it's something that we try to take it away as if this is not part of being human, this is not part of being husband or wife or whatever, we put it away in a box and we keep it in the hush. And so we keep it in the hush. Now the kids are growing up, they're also automatically going to keep it in the hush. What we are trying to say now is that if we continue to do that, whether we're doing it at home or we're doing it in the church, the internet is teaching them. Their friends are teaching them. So they are going to be taught. So what we want is, instead of the internet teaching them or their friends teaching them, we should be the one teaching them. Because when we are teaching them, at least we can show them the good part of sex as well as the bad part. We can show them the benefits of waiting, as long as if you don't wait and you're having sex and now you're pregnant and now you become a baby daddy and now you have to get a job because now you have to pay child support. I mean, you can
sexual diseases. I bring that up all the
and
time.
STDs, so there's so much involved that sex. It's something, as we mentioned before, it's very sacred, but it also you have to become responsible. The moment you start having sex, you need to be held accountable for what you do because things can happen. So
bring out all of the nasty sexual pictures. I put all of the nasty disease pictures in front of my kids. This is what it looks like.
You're doing what I talked about earlier. Installing fear into your kids so that they don't have sex.
Not fear.
That's not what we want to do. Because if that's the case, then you will never have sex. Okay, we know that we're having sex. We're enjoying sex. So we want to share with the kids the good part of sex.
Let's do something real quick, just because the question popped up, and maybe there's a young person on here that's watching it. So I know Patty's the youngest one here, but we're gonna go with Jeffrey on this one. Let's say Jeffrey PD is your son, and he's come to you with the question or questions about sex, and he's like, Dad, what is sex? Or Dad, I'm feeling these urges or something of that sort. Let's go ahead and kind of role play, if you guys wouldn't mind, for viewers and see what happens. Before you start off, PD, Eddie is in the backstage. He told me to tell you that he's backstage. I guess he's trying to join on, but go ahead. And Patty, if you would like to play mom, we already know you're gonna use the fear tactic, but let's go ahead and see what it will play out like. Go ahead, Jeff. I'll let you start with whatever question you want to ask.
Welcome, man. Welcome.
What's up, everybody? I'm ready for this role play, so let's make it happen.
All right. So, Pat, you want to be the child?
Wait, time out, really quick, and also because I saw this in the comments, really quick. Parents should also be transparent with the church. I think that's very, very, very important. I don't want to pass over that. I think if there's difficult conversations or stuff like that you're having in the house that you aren't comfortable with having, then bringing that to the church, because the church is your village. You know what I mean? They should be able to assist you. So I definitely wanted to jump in on that. But go ahead.
All right. So we're gonna do a role play now. Well, Pat will be the 11 or 12-year-old child.
I was a rebellious child, so good.
He's curious about sex. And Ed, since you just got here, you'll be the parent.
All right, let's do it.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Dad, I need
Boy, you having sex?
Wait. Well, not really, but I really wanted to talk to you because in my school, they were talking to us and they showed us what condoms are. And, I just wanted to talk to you to ensure that I just wanted to talk to you to find out a little bit more, but we had sex ed. And as a matter of fact, here, they gave me these 3 condoms here. So I was hoping you and Mom can talk to me a little bit more about sex.
Okay, so this is Patty. You're saying what our kid just said to us, or are you the kid?
I'm the kid.
You're the kid. Okay. Real quick, just so I'm clear, what teacher gave you the information? Right, the name?
Teacher Elizabeth in health class. We have health class this semester.
Okay. Now I was joking about that, but just to take a quick time out, it is good to find out who are the people that are teaching your kids these things, because you need to have the conversation with them. You need to know who they are, how they think, and can you even entrust in that, in their teachings? A lot of times, because we've gotten so used to, hey, you got hired by the school, so that means you're good to go. And we're not taking the extra step, because a lot of these people have way different ways of thinking about particular topics than what you and your spouse may have or want to raise your kids with. So Okay, well,
and they gave us some pamphlets and they said that I'm supposed to have my period, but mom never talked to me about that.
okay. Well, I'm definitely gonna talk to mom about that so we can figure out what we can do. But I mean, first thing I would do is I would let my daughter continue to talk. Right. I think the most important thing is to let her know that it's a clear path where she can just come. A lot of times, especially as men, we're wired to, okay, let me solve this problem, or let me give you the advice that you need so you can be better. And a lot of times, especially for your young girls and women, they don't need you to solve the problem. They need you to listen so that they can get it all out. So I would first continue to let her talk, find out what does she really know about sex, how does she feel about what she heard. And then what I would do, instead of trying to necessarily educate her, I would try to lead more with principles and values. Patty was talking about values throughout this whole thing today. And I think that's one of the missing things in the church. The church presents so many rules and is so stringent on rules so much
There you go.
that they forgot everything that the rules is technically representing the surface of the principles and values that Jesus came with. And that's all there is. There's nothing wrong with having sex. The reason why you don't want to have sex too early is because it can lead to so much complications in your life that two things would happen. One, the life that you had planned out for yourself is going to drastically change because of those complications. And two, which is the devil's number one playground, is to distract you. Is to put things in your life and in your way so that you to distract you, like Jimmy just did right there, to put things in your life and in your way so that you're not focusing as much time as you would on God or on building a relationship. So that's how I would go about it. In fact, like the exact words I would say, obviously I don't have it right now, but that's the theory of how I would approach that topic with my daughter, which is weird because my daughter's actually sitting right on me right now. So I look like a failed parent experience trying to tell y'all, don't have sex early, guys. Look, I'm telling you.
You're supposed to. But
Well,
I think
here's what I'm thinking as well. And thank you, Ed, for taking the time to really show us how you can struggle with that topic, because you see it. It's even among us, you can see the struggle. But here's the thing: allow this to be an open communication that can be ongoing. Obviously, the conversation you will have with a 12-year-old will be different with a 16 and 17-year-old who's actually now dating and actually have girlfriend and so forth. At 16 and 17, I'm not going to go around the bush with you. I'm going to sit down with you and I'm going to ask you, are you having sex?
Well, hold on.
And
so
yeah.
I want to interject right there. I think that is an issue that we suffer with because growing up, we might not have been involved into it until we think in the right age of like teenage years. But I'm telling you, growing up, when I was young, when I was in grade school, I had friends that was having sex.
Yeah.
And in this day and age, these kids are having sex way earlier than we
way
think.
early. You're
So
right.
I think a
You're
lot
right.
of that conversation needs to happen much, much sooner. And, you may not go in, like, hey, let me show you these websites I don't want you to go to. But, you may want to start off laying that foundation so that each year you can go deeper and deeper into it. But if you're starting your parental sex education for your kid at 16, I think you've already lost the battle.
They might be educating you by that time.
Yeah, so
for sure.
And there's a comment in here from YouTube. It definitely says to ask the question when you're having that open door conversation with them. You definitely will need to talk to them and ask them, what is it that they know about sex? What do they think sex is? And again, all this falls into one category of knowledge. The more knowledge the person has, the better, I should say, their decision making would be. If I don't know the answer to the test and it's multiple choice A, B, C, or D, I'm gonna pick C, and I'm hoping that I'm gonna get that one right. But if I got more knowledge about the subject matter at hand, I'm more than likely going to get the right answer. Now, I still might get it wrong, And I think that plays a little bit what Patty was saying. You know, you think this person is that someone special. You think you guys are going to go get married. So you're like, well, what the heck? Why not just do it now and stuff like that? But if you got more knowledge and you decide to wait and things of that sort, DeVal Franklin, Pastor Franklin, and his wife, Megan Good, they put out a book titled The Wait. So I do recommend a lot of young people to read that book as well. It's his perspective on it. I read that book, but I read that book after I was married. But there were some things in that book that it made me think that if I did have this book prior to being married, that I would have learned and approach things a little bit differently. These kids, if you sit here and just telling them to wait because it's best for them, or wait because that's what God said to do, wait for marriage and things of that sort, it's going to be hard when they have these internal urges or they have the peer pressure of everyone around them. So there's a
or sometimes they turn around and ask, did you wait?
Right.
And they put you right back in the box. Yep.
So real quick about that, right? There's something that needs to be said, I think, about the times that we live in versus the times that our kids are living in. And I think that's all. I think PD, you touched on it, and Patty, you had touched on it as well. I think we have to look at the full picture. This isn't one of those things, just like a lot of the topics we were discussing today, it's not one of those things where we can look at it from a singular platform. It's a multi spectrum on so many different things that impacts how things go. And so give you a little bit of example of that. For example, telling a kid to wait. If we tell our kids to wait, in all honesty, they will be waiting for the rest of their lives and until they die, because the generation that is coming up under us do not have the same notion of marriage or commitment that we have.
No, they don't.
They do not. They've seen what it looks like. They've experienced it totally different. And so therefore things like dating, first of all, courtship was out the door when I was growing up. So let's leave that alone, right?
Yeah.
So things like
some of them don't even want to get married, to be honest with you.
They don't. Like the whole concept of it is something that they just are too through. And a lot of these kids don't have good examples of what commitment looks like. They're coming from single family households. And so they've seen what it looks like when their mother has been, going through relationship. Hey, and going through hurtness and things of that nature. So these kids are growing up under different rules and guidelines. So when we try to teach them on those things, we're not going to be able to connect with them because we're not speaking the same language.
Yeah. I just received a text from Sister Kate, and she said, well, teach them the values that they are worth it and worth waiting for. And that text kind of remind me of a verse in the Bible that says, by beholding, we become changed. So we touch on the sexual topic, but what ought to supersede that is our relationship with God. So if you are a child of God and you are growing up in the church and you are beholding God, yes, you're going to have to deal with sex. Yes, you're going to have to deal with the temptation. Yes, you're going to have to deal with things that come along with it. But if your relationship with God is strong, even if you do fall, you're not going to continue. I mean, you're not going to continue. You're not going to continue in that path. You're going to realize, you know what, I've done it. Yeah, it's good. Yes, it's fun or whatever, but it's damaging my relationship with God, which is more important to me at this time right now. So by beholding, we become changed. So we need to install that kind of desire within our kids, but they also need to experience it from home. They need to experience it in the church. They need to experience it in the clubs around them and the group around them. Now, remember, the topic of discussion is not sex. The topic of discussion is why I hate religion, but I love God. But sex is one of those reasons that's keeping a majority of people from it, because they think that the church is too rigid, that the church doesn't educate enough about this topic. So they don't want to be bothered. They want to have it their way. So they don't come to church. So I'm glad we just touch on it just a little bit, but there's still so much more. And at a later time, we can always come back to that topic of discussion. Now, I wanted to ask um, on the subject of the church. I wanted to ask one of the reasons that young people are leaving the church, and earlier we mentioned authenticity, but here they say that the church isn't friendly to those who are struggling to believe. And my introduction, I mentioned it. What do you guys think about that? To me, that's very important. How do we deal with people who are in the church and they are struggling with whatever it is that the church teaches, okay, and but they are there, but they are struggling with it? How do we deal with them? How do we use that as an opportunity to even teach, or do we shine them away?
I'll say something. I think I told you about 3 or 4 weeks ago when you used to have the teleconference and people would call in. And I personally wouldn't say anything when it came to praying because I just felt like people were praying for 5, 10 minutes. And I'm the kind of person, I pray for 30 seconds. And I'm an introvert. But when it comes to that, I've always felt like, hey, you have these people that pray for 10 minutes and you only pray for 30 seconds. Should I call in? So, and I know when I talk to you, like, it doesn't matter. You just call in. So I think that a lot of times when you have your constant, what we think people should look like that go to church, and then you have somebody that came to church, want to be part, but feel like I don't fit in because, I don't talk like them. I don't walk like them, but I want to do it. It gets extremely intimidating. And I think that's the part where the person that apparently is demonstrating the attributes of a church goer need to then take that person under their wing and trying to work with that person. Because I'm telling you, for myself, it was intimidating. And I'm like, oh, I only pray usually for like 10 seconds, 5 seconds. And then you have these people saying 5 minutes long prayers. And I'm like, I'm sure if I call in, they'll think that I'm not saying much. So I didn't say much. And I'm not, you guys know I'm not shy at all. But when it comes to that part, I've always felt like I'm staying away because people will think that, hey, you know what was that? That's not even a prayer.
So I'll go ahead and add in about the shunning away part. I think that action should not have a place in church, period. As a coach, I coach basketball, right? Let's say I draw up a specific play and I got the ball in this person's hand and I need them to do this, that, and the third. And they do it wrong, right? What basketball does is, okay, it didn't work out in the play. During the game, we have more games to play, and I'm going to need this play. So what do you do with that player? You bring that player into practice, and you work with that player in practice on that play. So that
practice? You talking about practice?
Yes.
We're not talking about game. We're talking about practice.
Practice. So when that player gets to the next game, they understand more and they know how to handle it, and they will be able to score the basket. Does that make sense? And then I often think of the church as one of the other pastors I listen to as a hospital. And I think Pastor PD, you mentioned this as well. Like the church, if the church were to be a hospital, and how the hospital handles emergency patients, or when you come in injured, right? Just think of this. I come in with an injury. I just need a Band-Aid. Go over here to curtain 1. Boom, they'll take care of you. I come in with an emergency. I need emergency surgery. There is a place that they will take you. And in that room, in that place is where they would have emergency surgery for you. So just like Patty was saying, it's not anything to push you away from or out of when you're not acting according to. But when you do fall, like you will fall, all of us have fallen, and we probably will continue to fall. That's the grace of God being on us and being with us. We can always come back to him to get help. But when you do fall, that there is a place that you can come to and different departments in that place to assist you. If we just say, hey, you've fallen, all right, well, I talked to you about this topic 3 or 4 times now. It seems like you keep falling. There's nothing that we can do. You're going to have to stay out the church. We will lose people as far as being in the church.
Is it possible though that in the church we are so accustomed to being preached at, we're not equipped to having dialogue? Because when you have someone, for example, inside a school where you don't, you stand there as a teacher of the word, but you have someone sitting there and everything that you say, they find something against it and they are standing on their ground. My point is, do we give them enough room, allow them to disagree, allow them to still be in their journey wherever they are in their journey with God? They may just say, you know what, I don't believe Jesus is the only way. Hello, you in church and this is what you're saying? Get out of here, man.
Right.
No, but this is where they are.
But
They're
I
sitting
think
in the pews and they're telling you, this is what I believe. I don't believe that Jesus is the only way. Does the church have the the I don't even know the word. Do we have enough?
And the bandwidth to let, I mean, the truth of the matter is, if we're going to be real, we're going to be 100% real. Does the church have the bandwidth to say, okay, you know what, that one person doesn't belong? Even in the Bible, it did say when one is not acting correctly, you can actually remove it. The truth of the matter is, sometime, with all due respect, that person, if you're in a Christian church and you don't believe in Jesus, then maybe you should not be in a Christian church.
No, I think what I'm trying to say is they are struggling with their belief. You see, there will be people in the church who are struggling with some aspects of the things that are being taught in the church.
And I must say, I actually am one that currently is struggling with my Christianity belief.
How would you feel then if you are struggling with your Christianity, instead of, as Marcus say, have the support that you need to help you even understand, even dive deeper into the conversation? But if when you express how you feel, the church look at you as, how dare you? Don't you know this is a place of worship? Like you don't say those kind of things. How would you feel?
Well, knowing me, I probably would not say it because, I know I'm in a Christian church. But of course,
But if you did,
if I
if you
did,
did, you rather have the church? Would you rather have the church saying, "We value your opinion, we understand that. I wouldn't mind have a one-on-one conversation with you at your leisure time. We can study this together. You can bring your information. I'll bring my weekend." My thing is,
I would
we
prefer
have to keep
and
the conversation going. We
yeah,
we are so quick to dismiss people just because they don't fit in what we
agree,
believe in.
agree. I would prefer that. And for me, I don't know that I can say I'm struggling with my Christianity. What I'm saying is I've actually started looking into Buddhism and different, just because I'm a person of knowledge. I like to learn, and Christianity was what I was brought into. And I also feel like I need to learn and trying to understand a little bit more about Judaism, Buddhism, this and that, just to have a clear picture for myself. That's my own thirst and my own knowledge that I want, that I'm trying to find out. Just because I was raised in Christianity, and because of that, I became a Christian. However, do I know what else I could be if I know a little bit more about the other things that are out there? And
All
that's
right, one last point, and then we're closing. Christianity is too exclusive. I'm forced to believe. I'm forced to choose between my faith and my friends' other beliefs and faith. Young people feel that the church is like a country club only for the insiders. What do you say to that?
It,
Mhm.
it,
Go
it
ahead,
comes
Jim.
down it comes down to almost everything that everybody's been talking about comes down to one specific thing that it's a common theme that's been coming in my mind is relationship. Um, we for, we need to have not only relationship with God, but we need to have relationships with each other. So even the prescriptions of how, of a brother sins against me, how am I going to go talk to him one on one when we never talked one on one before?
Mhm.
Um, how am I going to admonish him when I've never even complimented him? And one of the stories in the Bible in John 5, it talks about the guy at the pool of Bethesda that was sick for what,
Yep.
30 some odd years. Okay. And then when Jesus healed him and he took up his bed and walked, and he walked by the leaders, and they said, "What are you doing? It's the Sabbath. You're walking on the Sabbath." What I think a lot of people skip over is those leaders weren't leaders just the day before. They were leaders for a long time. So they know that this guy has been trying to get healed for years. So if they had a relationship with that person, the first thing they would have said was like, "Oh my goodness, what happened? You're it's a miracle. You're walking. What happened?" That's what should have been the question. But because of the lack of relationship, because of the lack of love, we had this whole interaction about the rules. And that's what one of the things that we lack in church is we don't have relationship, we don't have love, we don't have transparency. So we're not being authentic with one
Mhm.
another. We're putting on these facades, we're putting on these acts. We're trying to look perfect. Trying to look like we've always been following the rules. And when it comes down to actually talking to somebody about their own issues, nobody's going to want to talk to you because, like I said it before, you've never been through it because you don't talk about it. Nobody's going to want to talk about the difficulties that you've had having with this, with they're having with this Christianity, because you've never expressed that you had the same struggles too,
Mhm.
and how you overcame them. So a lot of these things have to do with relationship, and especially the people that have the opportunity to be on stage, to be on to talk in front of the masses on a regular basis. They have a big responsibility not only to bring the gospel, but to bring in their own testimony and their own struggle. And that's one of the things that's important about testimony is when we testify, you may not reach everybody, but you may reach that one person that God wanted you to reach at the moment
Yes.
of struggling.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we have a very big responsibility on a broad scope and on a personal scope, interpersonally, so we can communicate and relate with one another.
And to add quickly, I think Jimmy had mentioned it and Markel had mentioned it as well. Being vulnerable. We say the word all the time, and I know for once, my husband always tell me, Patty, you don't you don't want people to know how you truly feeling. We talk about it all the time. We talk about being vulnerable, but we don't. A lot of the time, people don't want people to know how they're truly feeling, and I think a true relationship starts with being vulnerable. If you're having a weak moment, you should be able to be vulnerable with your pastor, be vulnerable with your spouse. You should be able, but it's easier said than done. I know for myself, I have a hard time being vulnerable with people because you have that, hey, you want to have that picture perfect, that you have it all together, but we all have those kind of moments. And I think when people see that you are vulnerable and you have been through this, they're then more inclined to say, oh, I actually had the same thing happen to me, but I didn't know how to say it.
I think people are afraid to be vulnerable, especially as African Americans, is because we fear we're going to be taken advantage of for that, whatever their vulnerability is.
Mhm.
Myself touching it real quick. It's also because as African American and Haitian descent, we have that shrug your shoulder resilience mentality.
Yeah.
My mom used to tell me I had 24 hours to mope about something. And that's the same thing I tell my kids. You have 24 hours. The next time, after 24 hours, you need to start coming up with solutions. So it's kind of hard to find that balance when you're taught, hey, be resilient, move on, so be it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I just want to add to that real quick. That's why I think it's important to be in like the right church as well, because like the Bible says that the church is a body. In my opinion, if you're disconnected from that body, you won't grow as much in your faith and you won't mature as much in the faith. And in my research, a verse I saw that I found corresponds to that is Psalms 92 verse 13. It says, "Those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. You know, and it doesn't say those who attend church, because you can attend church and your body is there, but your mind, your spirit can be disconnected in a totally different place. So it doesn't say those who attend church. It says those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of our God. So once you realize that, the question becomes, what does it mean to be planted? And when you're planted, that means like you can't move because you have roots and your roots are growing where you are. But if you decide to move your roots and leave that church, people from that church are going to call you and they're going to ask you, are you all right? You good? Everything all right? Where you at? Et cetera, because you are planted there. And the people you are planted with love you and they're encouraging you and they're building you up and they're flourishing you and they're helping you grow in your faith. So even if you wanted to leave, you can't, because you are planted where you are and you have roots there. But if your church is teaching you false doctrine and they're not helping you grow in your faith, then you should leave that church and find one that helps you grow. Because the Bible says, if you confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus and believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, you shall be saved. But obviously, the Lord expects us to grow as well.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So let's
I think those are.
Go ahead.
I think that was a very very good point that you all said, especially you, Jet, because I like the topic we have set aside is I hate religion, but I love God. And I think in order for this whole conversation for me, what it's done is made me realize that I can't really hate. I can only truly hate something that I don't understand.
Yep.
And now that I understand the problems with religion, and the problems with religion is that it's not perfect. And somewhere along the line, it was set up or presented that it's supposed to be perfect because of the obvious, where I'm a sinner, and so you want me to convert to your ways. So then you must be perfect. You must be without sin. And so I think now we can look at it and realize that, okay, religion isn't perfect, and it's not supposed to be something that's perfect. If you really look at what the church is supposed to represent, it's supposed to represent a body of practicing Christians, people
Yeah.
who are on a day basis working individually and together to become better. And if you and one of the things, I believe this was Pat Markel and Jimmy had mentioned about being vulnerable. If you look at the example that's given, Jesus had the most power and the most capability to wipe out anybody at any time whenever he was in trouble. Yet he not only showed restraint, but he
Yes.
showed his vulnerability by
Yes.
allowing himself to go through those things, which is a very hard thing, especially for us humans. Like even in raising my kids, there's certain ways that my kids talk now that I couldn't think about talking to my parents about, right? And I allow that now because I understand. I have a better understanding. So I think one of the things that I've learned from this topic today is, not judging the religion so harshly, because they're not perfect. They're trying to figure it out just as much as I am, and they have as much issues as I do. So I think the question becomes, well, then why even join a religion? Well, because it's easier to tackle things that's going on in your life collectively as a group than it is individually. I mean, just take a look where we're at in this world now with COVID, right? COVID has separated everyone. I mean, look at us now. We're all in different places in the world doing this show. Yet we're more connected now, and doctors all over the world are connecting and relating to more information so that we can get past this together. And I think it's the same ideology there with what the church is supposed to represent.
And I know we almost done. Go ahead, Jeffrey. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's why I think it's like essential that you find Jesus and not religion. Because if you find religion, it will leave you with more guilt and less joy. But if you find the Lord Jesus Christ, he'll bring you forgiveness and joy and peace.
But what I want to add to that, and maybe we could pick this up next week, is it's hard sometimes when you guys present Jesus as what we should be like. Remember what would Jesus do? Bracelets and things of that sort. It's a mindset, but also Jesus was perfect. And I think that's what the church tried to embodies a lot, which adds pressure to us, is to be like Jesus. There's no way I can be like Jesus, if you get what I'm saying. And if you don't get what I'm saying, I will break that down more on our next.
we can unpack this next week.
Tune
Like
in
you
next
mentioned
time
that.
on
Remember
Dragon
that.
Ball Z.
We can continue that conversation in the chat room.
that.
Because Markel, I have so many verses we can go right there so that you can be like Jesus.
I know we're pretty much. The one thing I want to add is collectively, the six of us, I think we have maybe years of education. If you add them all together, over 100 years of education. And my big thing is, besides, well, God, of course, is number one. Knowledge is power. I'm a big component of education, and knowledge is power. You know, just getting education and knowing something and not doing something about it in our generation is something that's very hurtful and can become a problem. We know what we know, and just like in the movie Coming to America, when he said, then what, you're the king or something, change it. So I think we talked about some of the challenges that we have with religion, and we talked about a few of potentially where we can go with that. I think we have an obligation to make that change.
I agree. And what I have on my note here, I say clearly there's a change that we need to make, and each of us have a part to play to be the church that you want to see. So we can talk about the church all we want, but until and I'm talking about me right now, until I begin to make changes in my life, I begin to be vulnerable in my life, then I can expect you to be. So sometimes it's so much easier for us to look at the other person and say, the church is full of hypocrites. Well, you know what? I'm the first hypocrite because I'm pointing finger at the church, and I'm realizing the more I point finger, the more I realize a lot of those things that I'm talking about that I myself, I need to be held accountable. I need to be doing them myself. So it's important that we acknowledge that. And also, I believe that the church, as a church, we need to disciple more than preach. And there's a difference. When you're preaching to someone and when you're discipling that person, we need to teach the church how to think, teach the church how to pray, teach the church how to attract others, see others who are different than you. I mean, we are good with keeping those who are in the same faith with us, but what about those who are not in the same faith? you know you're trying to invite people to church, and we're struggling because the only friends we have are those in the church. But what about those outside the church? Jesus went to the sinners. He went outside of them. And he's like, no, yes. We need them. We need them. They are part of the kingdom. So we need to reach out to them as well.
Even with that, we gotta separate people's wants in the church. We gotta separate culture in the church. There's a lot of next week's discussion, there's a lot of different layers.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
I agree.
How to repair, how to present the new church. So many people have their individual wants and agendas that they're pushing behind the church. So they're saying, oh, this is the church, but this is really what they're trying to get.
Correct. And Woody just mentioned in the chat room that we should also talk about how culture impact the church, and that's what you're saying as well.
I had mentioned that as well, is that culturally, our culture impacts the church as well.
Yeah. And then there was someone earlier, I think it was Carol, who mentioned that she mentioned what we need is love. She said love truly conquers all. God is love, therefore all we need to be is more loving toward ourselves and others. And that says a lot. I mean, if we are loving, it's going to change the way I interact with you. It's going to change the way I think about you. I'm going to look at you more as someone who is my brother, as someone who is my sister, than someone who is just a member of this church or someone that I need to invite to church. You know what I mean? So we're going to end here today.
Saying that, Monday, but to be honest with you, I used to think that love conquers all. But some people don't even know the meaning of love, and some people's way of dealing with love versus another, that's another thing. So the definition of love also needs to be described.
Absolutely. I agree with you. I thank you all. Before we go, I want to invite every one of us as we leave today to think about this gentleman here. His name is Maurice Gardner. A friend of mine sent me a text 2 days ago, and she's asking for us, the church, to lift him up in prayer. He's in a hospital bed right now, recovering after being shot in the head. So he needs a prayer. So I'm inviting you in your heck of the world, in your neighborhood, in your homes. Please, when you go down on your knees to pray for your brothers and sisters, please remember Maurice Gardner. Thank you so much, guys. It was a hell of a show. We'll be back here again next week. Remember, don't forget to subscribe if you like the videos, if you like the show, if you want to tell us topics of discussion, please send us a note. We love you, and we are out of here.